The automatic doors slid open with a tired whoosh, letting in a burst of cold air and the faint hum of city traffic. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead in the crowded hospital lobby. Nurses bustled past, heels clicking on tile, voices low but urgent. Phones rang, monitors beeped. Somewhere, a child cried. It was chaos wrapped in routine. Major Daniel Price wheeled himself forward, one hand firmly gripping the smooth rubber of his wheelchair rim, the other holding a sealed envelope against his chest. His eyes swept across the lobby, sharp and steady, beneath the brim of his military-issued cap. He wore no uniform, but his presence carried weight, the kind earned, not given. He moved slowly, deliberately, toward the front desk. Behind the counter, a young nurse in pink scrubs glanced up briefly before returning to her computer. She looked barely out of nursing school, her blonde ponytail bouncing as she typed with impatience. Daniel cleared his throat. "Excuse me." She didn't look up. "Just a minute." He waited. Seconds passed. Then a full minute. Finally, she sighed and turned toward him with a smile so thin it barely qualified as polite. "Can I help you?" "I'm here on behalf of Sergeant Leo Martinez," Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. "He passed yesterday. I was asked to witness the donation process and deliver something to his family afterward." The nurse blinked, then frowned. "Visitors aren't allowed past this point without clearance." "I have clearance," he said, lifting the envelope. "It's from the Department of Veterans Affairs. It's all in here." She stared at the envelope like it might bite her, then slowly took it. As she read, her lips pursed. "This doesn't look like hospital authorization. We need internal documentation. I can't let you in just because you have a letter." "It's not just a letter. His mother requested I be here. That was his final request." "I understand that, sir," she said, not sounding like she did. "But there are rules. You'll need to wait over there until someone can verify this." He glanced toward the corner she pointed to, a row of cracked vinyl chairs beneath a flickering light. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Slowly, he maneuvered his chair toward the wall. A teenage boy sitting nearby stared at Daniel's metal prosthetic leg with wide eyes before his mother gently turned the child's head away. Daniel offered a faint smile, one he had perfected over the years, one that said, "I'm used to this." Minutes passed. The nurse hadn't made a single call. She was chatting now with another receptionist, scrolling through her phone between short bursts of laughter. Daniel sat still, not because he was tired, but because movement would have made it easier to give up and leave. But that wasn't why. He came. Leo had bled out beside him in a Syrian ditch 3 years ago, whispering a single request. "If anything happens, get my tags to my mom. Make sure they don't forget me." That promise weighed heavier than any combat gear Daniel had ever worn. He wheeled back to the desk, slower this time. The nurse looked up, irritation flashing in her eyes. "I've been sitting there for 15 minutes, he said. "Has someone been notified?" She rolled her eyes. "Sir, I told you we're working on it. Please be patient." A man in a business suit standing behind Daniel frowned and shifted uncomfortably. A woman with a clipboard walked past, gave Daniel a second look, then kept going. People were starting to notice, but not loudly. Just glances, just questions forming. He didn't raise his voice. "This isn't a social call. I'm here on a request that came from the family of a soldier whose heart will stop beating in less than an hour. That heart will save another man's life today. I just want to be there when it happens." The nurse folded her arms. "Then you'll wait like everyone else." Daniel looked into her eyes. He didn't yell. He didn't plead. But he didn't move. "I don't think you understand what this means," he said, voice low. "But that doesn't change the fact that I do." She hesitated, something flickering across her face. Annoyance, confusion, or maybe a twinge of doubt. But she turned away without another word, tapping at her keyboard like nothing was out of place. Daniel wheeled back, facing the hallway that led to the operating rooms. His hands rested in his lap, unmoving. And though no doors had opened for him yet, he knew he wasn't leaving. Not until Leo Martinez got what he deserved. The minutes crawled, each one heavier than the last. Daniel sat alone in the corner of the waiting room, hands resting calmly on his lap, though his patience had begun to fray. The walls around him were sterile white, covered in smudged posters promoting flu shots and mental health awareness. Children laughed somewhere behind the glass divider, unaware of the silence growing in that small pocket of the emergency department. A pair of nurses passed him without acknowledging his presence. One pushed a supply cart, the other adjusted. Her badge, their conversation focused on lunch plans and shift rotations. Neither looked down. Neither saw the envelope in Daniel's lap. Neither asked why a man in a wheelchair had been sitting still for half an hour, staring at a door that remained shut. The receptionist who'd dismissed him earlier was now chewing gum and scrolling through her phone. Her screen glowed under the harsh ceiling lights. She hadn't made any effort to contact someone in charge. If she had, no one had arrived. A woman near the vending machines whispered something to her husband. She kept glancing in Daniel's direction. Her voice was too soft to make out, but the subtle shake of her head said enough. Daniel shifted slightly, in his chair. His left side still ached during cold weather, a souvenir from the shrapnel lodged there years ago. He ignored the pain. His eyes remained fixed on the hallway. He'd seen worse than this. He'd waited longer. But this was different. This wasn't war. This was indifference, disguised as policy. Across the room, an older gentleman in a blue flannel shirt leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying Daniel. After a moment, he stood and approached slowly, a limp in his step. He didn't speak right away, just nodded toward the folded paper in Daniel's hand. "You Army?" the man asked, voice quiet but firm. "Was," Daniel replied. "Retired." "The man nodded again. "Thought I recognized the posture." Daniel offered a faint smile. "They make sure it sticks." The man didn't laugh. Instead, his eyes drifted to the envelope. "You waiting on someone?" "A soldier," Daniel said. His name was Leo Martinez. He didn't make it back. The man's lips pressed into a tight line. "I'm sorry to hear that. You knew him well?" "He died in my arms." That was all he needed to say. The man nodded once more, deeply this time, and returned to his seat. But the way he looked at Daniel had changed. With understanding. With quiet respect. Moments later, the double doors leading to the operating rooms opened briefly as a nurse stepped through, calling a name that wasn't Daniel's. The glimpse inside revealed only a flash of blue scrubs and stainless steel. Then the doors shut again, sealing away everything he had come for. Daniel tightened his grip on the envelope. Behind the desk, the receptionist took another bite of her gum and laughed at something on her phone. She hadn't even glanced toward the man still waiting. Her indifference wasn't malicious, just casual, like he was another chair in the room, another object to ignore. A teenage boy sitting across the room opened his phone camera and slowly angled it toward Daniel. His mother gently pulled his hand down. "Don't do that," she whispered. "But Mom, he's—" "I said no," she cut him off, her eyes flickering to Daniel. "It's not polite." Daniel pretended not to hear. He was used to being noticed in silence. What he wasn't used to was being ignored in purpose. Another 10 minutes passed, still no response, still no movement, still no acknowledgement from anyone who mattered. Daniel's patience thinned. He rolled forward again, slow and steady, until he was back at the desk. The receptionist didn't look up. He waited. When she finally noticed him, she sighed audibly and gave him the kind of look reserved for people asking for something they didn't deserve. "I told you to wait. Someone will be with you when they're available." "You've told me that twice now," Daniel said, "and I've been sitting here for almost an hour." "Well, I'm not in charge of scheduling," she said, eyes drifting back to her screen. "If they haven't called you, there's nothing I can do." Daniel drew a breath. "That's not true. You haven't even tried." Her fingers froze above the keyboard. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't say anything. He leaned forward just slightly. "I don't expect special treatment, but I'm not a stray who wandered in off the street. I'm here because someone gave their life in service, and his mother asked me to be present when the last part of him helps someone else live. All I'm asking is to honor that." The words weren't angry. They weren't loud, but they left the air charged. The nurse behind him had stopped sorting charts. A man in a leather jacket shifted closer. Eyes began to turn, one by one, not with shock, but with awareness. The receptionist forced a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Sir, you're being dramatic. Everyone here has someone they care about." Daniel didn't respond. He simply turned and wheeled himself back to the center of the room. And this time, he didn't sit in the corner. He stayed in the middle, where everyone could see him. The mood had shifted. Whispers grew. Phones appeared. And somewhere in the back, a doctor noticed, the stillness wasn't just silence anymore. It was the beginning of something bigger. The emergency room had never been quieter. Not truly silent, but still in that strange, sharpened way where every sound mattered. The hum of vending machines, the soft rustle of coat fabric, even the nervous tapping of someone's foot against the tile. It all felt amplified. Daniel sat still in the center of the waiting area, not hidden anymore, not in the background. His presence demanded attention without needing to speak. The envelope still rested on his lap. Its edges had begun to soften beneath his grip. Around him, conversations had slowed. Strangers watched carefully, unsure of what they were witnessing, but aware that it mattered. A nurse passed by with a chart in hand. Her steps faltered briefly as she saw him, and then she picked up her pace, disappearing through the swinging doors. The receptionist at the front desk had grown visibly uncomfortable, her once casual posture now rigid. Her fingers tapped nervously against the side of the monitor, as if trying to summon authority from a blank screen. A low voice spoke up from across the room. "Excuse me, ma'am, has anyone come to speak with that man yet?" Heads turned. It was the older gentleman in the flannel again, standing beside his chair now. His voice was steady, polite, but edged with concern. The receptionist looked up, startled. "Sir, it's being handled. Please take your seat." Another voice chimed in, this one from a young woman seated near the windows. "It doesn't look like anything's being handled. He's been here since before I checked in." Murmurs spread. A few people glanced at their phones. One man slowly raised his camera, not saying a word, just pointing the lens quietly toward the center of the room. Then the moment broke. The side doors swung open, and a tall man in blue scrubs stepped into view. His name tag caught the light. Dr. Adrian Shaw, Chief Trauma Surgeon. His brow furrowed as he scanned the lobby, eyes narrowing when they landed on the man in the wheelchair. "Daniel?" he asked, stepping forward with urgency. Daniel turned, his head slightly. Recognition flickered. "Adrian," he said, "didn't expect to see you here." Dr. Shaw's face changed instantly, from confusion to understanding to guilt, all within seconds. He stepped closer, eyes darkening as he took in the room, the envelope, the attention. "You shouldn't be out here," Shaw said. "Why weren't you brought straight to the donor wing?" Daniel gave a half shrug. "I was told to wait." Shaw's jaw clenched. He turned toward the front desk. "Who told him that?" The receptionist stiffened, words caught in her throat. I didn't know. He just—" "You didn't ask," Shaw cut in sharply. "You saw a veteran in a chair with official documents and didn't ask a single question." Her face drained of color. "I thought he was—" "You thought wrong," he snapped, before turning back to Daniel. "Come on, you're not waiting another minute." A quiet hush fell as Shaw wheeled Daniel forward himself, guiding him toward the secured wing behind the main hallway. People stepped aside. A few nodded in quiet acknowledgement. Someone muttered, "Took long enough." As they passed the vending machines, Daniel spoke. "Leo's on the table already?" "Prep just finished. He'll be under soon," Shaw replied. "I'm sorry this happened." Daniel nodded once. "It's not about me. I made him a promise." Shaw's grip tightened on the chair handles. "He was a good man." He was 19. The hallway stretched ahead, each light flickering overhead as they moved through. When they reached the double doors, Shaw paused and turned. "They'll want a witness for the procedure documentation. You're already cleared." Daniel reached for the envelope, gently pulling out the folded dog tags, their metal edges worn smooth. "I won't stay long. I just want to hand these over when it's done." Shaw opened the doors. Inside, the room was quiet, filled with sterile light and the steady rhythm of machines preparing for something final. Daniel entered, leaving behind the noise, the ignorance, and the waiting. Back in the lobby, the conversations had returned, but not to what they were before. Phones buzzed. Screens glowed. Tweets were forming. Posts were going live. The word veteran kept appearing. At the desk, the receptionist stared at her monitor, unmoving, as the weight of what had happened began to settle. Daniel hadn't asked for a spotlight, but now the world had begun to turn and look. Daniel remained still as the monitors beeped in slow, rhythmic patterns around him. The surgical team moved quietly, their voices reduced to whispers, their steps practiced and deliberate. No one asked why he was there. No one questioned his right to stand beside the glass. The tags in his hand were cool, their weight light, but unshakable. He didn't blink as they administered anesthesia, didn't flinch when the machines began their calibrated hum. Leo Martinez had always wanted to save lives. Now, in a white room with soft lights and sterile air, he would do it, one last time. Daniel's eyes didn't leave the table. When the procedure was complete, a nurse stepped out into the corridor to meet him. Her expression was gentle, respectful. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she held out a sealed container. A small plastic case labeled with Leo's name and the words "Personal Effects." Daniel placed the dog tags inside and closed the latch, softly. "His mother asked that I bring them back personally," he said, voice calm. The nurse nodded, understanding more than she let on. As Daniel wheeled himself toward the exit, Dr. Shaw met him again in the hall. No lecture, no apology this time, just a quiet walk beside him. "I don't think they realize what happened out there," Daniel said. Shaw kept his eyes forward. "They will." Outside, the air was colder now. Dusk had begun to stretch across the sky, and headlights blinked on across the parking lot. Daniel reached the sidewalk and paused, looking back once, not at the hospital, but at the windows where people had watched and judged and decided what he was worth. By the time he reached the street, his name was already trending. Someone had recorded the conversation. A clip only 40 seconds long, his calm voice saying, "I just want to honor the man who died saving lives," followed by the sharp tone of the receptionist brushing him off. That was all it took. The internet didn't need more. Veterans groups picked it up within hours. Posts appeared on military forums, then jumped to Facebook, Twitter, and news feeds. People commented not only on the mistreatment, but the quiet, dignity in how he responded. No yelling, no argument, just presence and principle. The hospital's name became a hashtag. Statements were demanded. Emails flooded in. By morning, a national news anchor was reading the story live. A retired Army medic was denied entry to witness his friend's final organ donation despite carrying official clearance. The hospital has since released a brief statement expressing regret. Regret didn't satisfy anyone. The next day, the hospital administrator gave a press conference. The receptionist had been placed on leave, the staff ordered to undergo new training on veteran protocol. The speech was polished, but the public had already moved past explanations. What they wanted was accountability. Back in his small apartment, 2 states away, Daniel ignored the television. He sat at his table, polishing the tags he'd carried for days, now resting inside a velvet-lined box. There were no cameras here, no audience, only silence. A knock at the door came just after sunset. It was a courier, an older woman with kind eyes and a brown jacket. She handed him a thick envelope marked from the Department of Defense. Inside was a certificate of recognition, signed by the secretary himself. It wasn't for Daniel. It was for Leo, the name engraved in silver cursive. The mission noted, the life honored. 2 days later, Daniel made the trip to New Mexico. The drive was long, and his left side throbbed by the time he reached Las Cruces. He didn't complain. Pain had become background noise. At the doorstep of a small beige house, he was greeted by a woman with deep lines around her eyes and a quiet strength in her posture. "You must be Major Price," she said, voice thin but steady. "I promised him I'd bring these to you," Daniel said, offering the case with both hands. She took it gently, holding it like something sacred. "He talked about you a lot," she said, eyes welling. "Said you saved him once." "He saved me more than he ever knew," Daniel replied. They stood in silence, the weight of grief and memory between them. No further explanation was needed. By the end of the week, national news had moved on. Headlines shifted, trends changed. But the people who watched the video didn't forget. Veterans wrote letters. Nurses at other hospitals spoke up. Policies were revised quietly in places that hadn't even been involved. Respect didn't trend for long, but it left echoes, and Daniel never asked for anything. Not recognition, not reward. He had kept a promise. He had stood still when others tried to move him, and he had ensured that one soldier's final mission, helping others live, was not lost in the noise. That was enough.